Create Art Podcast. Project NaPoWriMo, otherwise known as National Poetry Writing Month. Hello, friends. This is Timothy Kimo Bryan, your head instigator for Create Art Podcast, where I bring my 20-plus years of experience in the arts and education world to help you tame your inner critic and create more than you consume. So this month is National Poetry Writing Month. Happens every April. And National Poetry Writing Month is known as NaPoWriMo, and it's a creative writing project. And what they do is they give you prompts. If you go to the NaPoWriMo website at napowrimo.net, and they'll give you 30 prompts for the 30 days in April. Now, on the website, you can also interact with other people. This year is going to be different from the previous years that I've done this project. This year, I'm going to be writing poetry throughout the year, and I am following a different prompt than the one that the National Poetry Writing Month folks do. Now, I've been doing poetry since 1988. I know for a lot of people here, they're like, whoa, the 1900s. But I've been doing it for a long time. I've been writing poetry for a long time and performing my poetry. So this year, like I said, I'm going to be writing all throughout the year. And the blog that I'm using is called Think Written. And the links for that will be in the show notes. I'm also going to be performing these works at Couture Coffee House here in Fredericksburg, Virginia, on their Friday night Snaps open mic poetry reading. You'll have a link for that, again, in the show notes. And a lot of people, they ask me, hey, Tim, why do you do this to yourself every year? And my answer to that is, if I'm going to ask you to be, taming your inner critic and creating things, then I need to be doing it too, right alongside you. So that's why this year I'm doing it a little bit different, but I will be interacting with the poets there on the NaPoWriMo site. And we'll see how this goes. I'm pretty excited to be doing it this way. All right, so for today's prompt, write your own two-part poem that focuses on a food or type of meal. At some point in the poem, describe the food or meal as if it were a specific kind of person. Give the food meal at least one line of spoken dialogue. So I kind of followed this, but I kind of didn't follow it. But, that's what you come to expect with me. This one's entitled Thanksgiving Dinner. I never really thought about this meal when I was younger. We always drove 1 hour that took forever. No rest stops unless you call pissing in the cornfields a rest stop. We always left before dawn, and we were lucky to return with our lives. We would eat freshly slaughtered ham. Nothing tasted sweeter. And mashed potatoes, not from a box, was chunky and gritty, smashed rather than mashed. With all the cousins in their bear house, and each year a James Bond flick on in the background. The cigarettes overflowed in the ashtray. The beers and wine were flowing, even for the kids. And I'd like to say I tasted my first beer there, but I'd be lying to you. Just like all the lies of, yeah, we are good to drive, before the days of mad and knowing better. One day I stopped going. Could have been because my folks found God. He was hiding in the churches that met when I was watching wrestling, and we, as a family, turned away. I didn't really get that feeling again. Yes, there was destructive activities that I can see from the safety of time. And Thanksgiving told me that I didn't let you die during those days. Yes, there was the accident 1 year before the times of DUIs. Yes, there was the car on fire that you passed without a care. But I didn't let you die. I kept you as safe as I could for something else. When I lived alone with the roommates and on the 33rd floor above the lake, the diner that I'd frequented was open, taking in others like me, without friends or a family. And on the TV, still black and white, a game of hockey played quietly. While the others were munching on turkey, I became engrossed. And that was when I decided the next year to hold a feast, but unknown to me what the next year would bring. I was alone in my apartment. I had finally escaped the crowds, making a meal for two in a studio barely big enough for one. In case there was a knock at the door, there was none. But the next year was different. I'd stepped out and allowed myself to feel, to become attached to those who enlightened me, on being a human, on being open and vulnerable. And that year, I had a few friends over who had nowhere else to go, and we dined like kings. And Thanksgiving told me, I am preparing you for a much better feast, a feast that you can share with family and friends, a family you created, and friends who were true. And so, 1 year of cooking and clamoring, there I was, a husband and father of 3, mentor to a nephew, and friends who brought friends to feast. We dined on duck and other delicacies. We left a spot open for anyone who had nowhere to go. And my children sat there and asked, "Why the empty spot?" And we said together, "That spot is for me. That spot represents the chair I once sat at, alone in my studio. That chair represents those who couldn't make it home." With a confused look, no more questions came, and a small wish was born that day. A wish they wouldn't have to carry that tradition forward. A wish that one day I wouldn't either. A wish that the past could be forgiven, and a wish for a better year ahead. All right, so that was my poem for this day for National Poetry Writing Month. I hope you enjoyed it. You can go right to the website, createartpodcast.com, and you can go ahead and comment right there in the comment section if you like. Now, something I'd like to ask you is, if you enjoyed it, shoot me an email, timothy@createartpodcast.com. I want to hear about your journey, and I want to hear about what you're working on. And if you'd like to be on the show or, would like to discuss a topic that's giving you trouble, well, then go ahead and email me. Let's start that conversation. I also want to let you know about another podcast that I do, and that one is called Find a Podcast About, and that's where I help you find your next binge-worthy podcast and outsmart that algorithm. You can find that podcast at findapodcastabout.xyz. Last thing I'd like to say here is if you found value in the show, let me know. Pass it on to a friend. If you have ideas on what I could do better to make this a 5-star podcast, I want to hear about those too. I want to be helping you with your art, to be bold with your art, as I do it right beside you. I'll see you next time.